Good morning, students. Today we are going to study the poem Dover Beach, written by Matthew Arnold. Dover Beach is Matthew Arnold's best known poem, written in 1851. It was inspired by two visits he had with his wife, Franks, made to the south coast of England, when the white cliffs of Dover stand 20 miles from the coast of France. Dover Beach is a honeymoon poem written in 1851, shortly after Matthew Arnold's marriage to Frances Lucy Whitman. It evoves quite literally the sweetness and the light which Arnold famously found in the classical world, in whose image he formed his ideals of English culture. In fact, those public values were privatized in the very word the poem conjures for us, honeymoon. Dover Beach fundamentally seems to be about a withdrawal into personal values. Historical pessimism moves in swiftly as a tide. The poem begins with a romantic tradition style, that is, using simple language. The poet says, "The sea is calm tonight." The line is complete in itself and simply means that everything is fine and calm. In the next line, he vividly describes the vista around him. According to the poet, as usual, the tide is full and the moon is lightening the streets, that is, the shores. On the other side, that is the France coast, the light glimmers and then vanishes, like the twinkling of stars. When the light vanishes, the poet sees the white cliffs which are shining in the moonlight on the shore of England. Now, for the first time in the poem, the poet interacts with his wife. He requests her to come to the window side and enjoy the pleasant air of the night. He then asks her, using the word only, to focus on the edge where the sea meets the land, long line of spray. The land is moon blanched, that is, looking white and shiny due to the moonlight. In the next line, the mood suddenly changes. There is a shift from ecstasy to sorrow. The poet says, "Listen to the unpleasant and harsh sound of the pebbles that are pulled out by the strong ideas and turned back to the shore when the tide returns." The process is continuous, and the poet focuses on their rhythmic movement. The movement of the pebbles is tremendous, cadence slow. That is, they are trembling in a rhythmic movement. The rhythmic sound of the pebbles mingles with that of the poem. The movement of the pebbles with the terrible sound of its course, not pleasant, brings out the note of music that is sad and never-ending. The stanza 2 begins with the reference to Sophocles. It is the tradition of the Victorians to refer to the classical poets and writers in their works. The poet says that Sophocles had already heard this eternal note of sadness while sitting on the shores of Aegean. The turbid ebb and flow means the movement of water in and out. It also refers to the loss of faith. Sophocles compared eternal movement with the miseries of humans, which like them are also never-ending. This is how he succeeded in composing painful tragedies. According to the poet, he can hear the same sound of land, sea, and retreating tide by sitting like Sophocles on the shores of the Northern Sea, that is, the English Channel. Distant means far from Sophocles. The term "we" in this context refers to the poet and his bride, but in the broader sense, it refers to every human. In this sense, the poet draws out attention to the universality and the eternity of sadness. The term "sea of faith" is usually understood doesn't simply mean religion. According to the poet, the sea of faith once had united the whole of mankind, but now it has declined. He hears its sadness, longings, and roars of pulling away of faith as night wind is hovering over the sky. What remains there are the naked stones which have been pulled out of the earth by the tides. The poet is mixing the natural happening with the human faith. As we know, the poem was written during the Victorian era. At that time, there was a development of industrialization that led to capitalism, which further led to individualism and greed. The sea of faith that once existed among the mankind gradually vanished. The faith can refer to the trust, humanity, religion, kindness, sympathy, spiritualism, and so on. Thus, the greed gave a death blow to this faith. In this sense, the whole scene, which was calm and pleasant from stanza 1, can be considered as sea of faith. But suddenly, the night wind or the industrialization or science or technology came that muddied that peace and spirituality. Instead, it made the greed that was hidden because of spirituality. Naked shingles or bare pebbles, the whole poem, including the scenes, symbols, loves, etc., become a metaphor and make the poem quite symbolic. Stanza 4 is characterized by a feeling of escapism. The poet makes his beloved to be true to him. Note that these lines relate to the sea of faith. He wants to bring that faith back. The poet believes that the world, which was like the land of dreams, or how he described it in the beginning, is in reality hollow from inside. There is no joy, love, light, certainty, peace, sympathy in it. Both the poet and his beloved are on a darkling plain, that is a dark and ugly world. They hear the sound of struggle and fights of the people who are fighting without seeing each other. This fight can be regarded as a fight of opposing ideologies in the mind of the man, or that of the forces of materialism or trivial battles of age and youth, and are also selfish and political forces. The poem thus ends with a terrible picture of society during the Victorian age. Duvelbich is the most celebrated poem by Matthew Arnold, a writer and educator of the Victorian era. The poem expresses crisis of faith with the speaker acknowledging the diminished standing of Christianity, which the speaker sees as being unable to withstand the rising tide of scientific discovery. The beach is an ideal setting for Arnold's poem. The land is a symbol of continuity. The sea is a symbol of change. The waves of the sea are constantly drawing the pebbles and sand back, then flinging them forward, begin and cease, and then again begin. The sea is a symbol of religious faith, once full. Meanwhile, the land remains constant, and the cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast. The narrator feels that misery and sadness await where they meet a lament for the things. The imagery related to the sea pervades the poem. The first line describes the sea as calm at high tide, and the description is reiterated in the line 5, the tranquil bay. This early in the poem, the sea seems to represent stability, especially in contrast to the chaotic final image of the poem. The poem, though speaks of a strong message, is yet very hopeful. I hope this video has been useful for you. Thank you.